Welcome. This is David Fox in the UK speaking. With me I've got Josef Doods, CEO at Archiware. Hi Josef.
Hi David. Welcome also from my side here.
Yeah, so we got Josef's in Germany, I'm in the UK, and let's begin. So just a little bit of housekeeping info for you. We're recording this session as we always do with the Archiware webinars, so we'll share this with you all via a YouTube link, edited version of this video. We're really keen on your questions, so you can type questions into the GoToWebinar control panel. I've included a big screen grab of it there so you can find it. So Josef's going to keep an eye on the questions whilst I'm talking, or whilst he's talking. And if there's a question which we feel is relevant to the bit of the presentation that we're at, then we will cover that question live during the presentation. If stuff is a bit more esoteric, we'll take it at the end. So, and Josef, I think when you're looking in the questions box, once we've dealt with a question, you can click the little trash can to delete it so that we don't answer the same question twice, although I'm sure that won't happen. Yeah. Okay, so in this webinar, as promised on the blurb, we're going to do 10 things. We're going to do these 10. So we've got number 1 and 2, which are general features, which are kind of the headline features around the way that we're managing cloud and disk storage through these new things called elastic containers, which also allow you to do bare metal recovery from cloud or disk. So we'll cover that. We'll do some demos around that. Then we've got 5 good things in P5 Archiware around Ltfs, Glacier from AWS, compression, saving searches, more minor stuff. A lot of it is UI stuff, so we'll have a quick look in the UI where that's relevant. There's a couple of things around backup to show you and a feature in Synchronize. So I won't go into detail reading those out because we're going to cover each one of those in more detail in a slide. So let's begin. So, I should have said this is a 1 hour webinar. We'll probably do like 45 minutes of content, and then we'll allow 10 minutes at the end for questions. So we'll all be done within the hour. Okay, so elastic containers and new storage management, what's that? So the idea with this new feature is it's much easier to configure both disk and cloud storage. So tape remains as it was. We've got to deal with tape libraries and drives and tapes, same way as we did before, but we can simplify the way that we manage and handle cloud and disk storage by not requiring lots of separate virtual tapes in the volume list in P5 as we previously had. So you can now configure a single volume in P5 which will grow as required to accommodate the backup or archive data that's coming into it. So this is for both cloud and local disk storage. And in order to set one of these elastic containers up, which we'll do in a moment, it's very simple. You just need to set up your object store. By object store, I mean cloud storage service, Amazon S3, Glacier, Wasabi, Backblaze, Google, Azure, all the different storages, cloud storages that P5 already supports. So you set one of those up, you create a bucket and provide the bucket to P5, specify the local folder that P5 needs to have available either as a cache or for permanently keeping a copy of everything. And then P5 does the rest. It sets up this volume, single volume in the volume list that's going to take all of the data. And it also creates the pool for you so that you can point your backup jobs or your archive jobs at that pool. So real minimal configuration to get up and running with this. The source data that you're throwing into this container is encapsulated as in an LZ4 object, and we basically create objects with a minimum size of about 1/4 of a gigabyte so that we're optimizing. We're not throwing small files at the cloud bucket, which is inefficient, going to be slow because of latency, but not too big either, so that when we're downloading data, we don't have to download very large files if there's only a small amount of data being recovered. And there's also new features around this, which we'll cover later, around backup specifically, because the new cloud elastic containers have a better recycling ability for when you're running backups, and older data in that backup that no longer needs to be retained can be removed from this container storage in a very efficient way. So I've got a little graphic here that we've featured in some emails recently just to illustrate the idea of the cloud container and how it's optimized. So we've got a source folder with some thousands of files in it. If you just use like an FTP style tool to copy all of that stuff into your cloud bucket, then you've got thousands of operations against that cloud bucket. If you've got lots of small files, that's really inefficient. As a 2 kilobyte file might take 10 seconds to actually open the connection up and copy the file and shut it down again. So your job could end up taking forever. So what we're doing with the cloud elastic containers is that we create these intermediate compressed containers that, as I said, are a quarter of a gigabyte, 256 meg minimum size. But if you have a gigabyte movie file that you're archiving, that will get its own container. So that will be kept in a separate container, and that will get uploaded as a larger object in its own right. But smaller objects are bundled together. And then we're basically not having to upload anything less than a quarter of a gigabyte in size against your cloud storage. So this is much faster. So hopefully that's quite clear. So let's have a demo. What I'm going to show you now is adding some cloud storage and then setting up the cloud container, and then we'll do a backup to that cloud container so you can see how it fits together. So in my browser here, I've got a local installation of P5. All I've done is added a license, but otherwise this is a completely fresh installation of P5 version 7.0.1. One thing I just wanted to mention is that there is a, oh no, I can't see it yet, but it's okay. Ignore me. So I go to Storage Manager on the left-hand side, and you'll see that we have a new tabbed interface here where you get an overview to explain what's possible. You can add your tape libraries, drives, and storage containers and cloud services across these different tabs. So we're going to add some cloud storage, well, a cloud storage container. You see the two buttons at the bottom, one for local disk storage, one for cloud storage. So I'm clicking that one. So the two steps are: give us a cloud service, give us a local storage directory. We need a name that we're going to label this by. So let's make a new service for this data to go into. I'm going to use tried and trusted Amazon S3 for my demo, just standard Amazon S3. I'm just going to pause my broadcast momentarily while I just pull up some highly secret and confidential data that I can plumb into here. You keep everybody entertained, Joseph, whilst I'm...
Yes.
Okay, that's good. And then I'm going to hide that. And then I can start again. So now everything is magically entered. So I've entered some credentials. I'm going to apply that. I'm going to test. It's always worth making a test, even if you're sure you've got everything right, to make sure that you've got a successful connection. So this is my home internet going up to S3, so this isn't particularly fast. So I have my S3 service. All I need to do now is specify a directory. So I've got a directory in my home folder here called P5 cache. I'm going to choose that one. And the name, we started in the backup tab, so P5 knows this is backup, but I prefer to have the word written out in full. And there's a checkbox here. If I want to have this backup stored both locally on disk and also a copy of it in the cloud, then that's the checkbox that will get you that. If you don't tick it, then we're just backing up to the cloud and deleting any local copies of the files once we've uploaded them to the cloud storage. So Archiware now tells us that a pool and a volume and a drive have been created, so all of the pieces necessary for this to work. So I have my container storage showing up under the container storage tab. I've got a pool called Amazon S3 Backup with unlimited capacity, and I've got a volume ready to write to, again with unlimited capacity. So all we need now is a backup plan. So let's make a backup plan. Untitled 1 is its name, and we will back up a folder from localhost. That's the local machine, and I've just added some files into a folder in my home directory called for backup, which is nice and small because the backup is quite slow to the cloud from my home. And then we will add a backup event I want this backup to run on the weekdays.
David, maybe not so fast because you are really quick.
Am I going too fast?
Yeah, I don't know, but for me not, but maybe for the audience.
Right, I'm slowing down a bit then. So,
Yeah.
so I've made the backup plan needs some data to back up. So that's this for backup folder at the top, and it needs a schedule. And I've just configured this to run at 10:30 on Mondays through Fridays, and it's going to write to this storage container called Amazon S3 Backup that we just created. And you'll notice, if you're familiar with P5 previous versions, there are no options here for choosing whether this backup should be an incremental or a full backup. So when backing up to a storage container, it will always be an incremental backup. And at the same time, you can specify in the Options tab how long the data should be retained for by this backup. And that means that any old files from the backup that are over 28 days old, P5 will recycle the storage within our elastic volume, our container volume, and remove some of the containers and delete them from the cloud storage, so you're no longer paying for them. And this is why it's necessary to always run incremental backups, because to run a full backup, you basically have to leave all the backup data in the cloud and take a whole fresh backup, which makes no sense because you're paying for that storage, and the full backup may take a long time. So this technique,
David, and maybe important to notice that it makes the things not more secure if you have 2 times the same file on the cloud storage. So the cloud storage is per definition already safe, and 1 copy on the cloud storage, it's the same amount of security you have if you have a two times of a copy. So.
Yes, because when you save something to the cloud storage, the cloud vendor is actually storing that on more than one device. In the case of S3, it's in 3 different data centers in the same geographical part of the world. So there's a lot of redundancy already there. So yeah, it doesn't make sense to use your backup software to make 2 backups. I mean, if you were going to have 1 local time machine backup and then another cloud backup, that makes sense, but not 2 Archiware backups. So I will apply all the changes I made to this backup plan, and now I'm going to run a backup manually. So I'm going to use the Start Now button, and this is a new feature in version 7. This is basically when you manually use the Start Now button to start a backup job, you can specify a limit to the amount of data that will be backed up. If you enter 0, which we're going to do here, it will save all the data. But if you were just doing a test and you only wanted to save a couple of gigabytes, then you can specify that. Or if you're writing to a device with a limited storage capacity, which is sometimes the case, then you can specify that storage capacity in here. So let's start this job, and I'll use the monitor button. And remember, we're doing a small backup of not a lot of data from my local machine to this S3 cloud object store. So you see we've uploaded 40% of around 11 megabytes so far. And when this
David,
yes,
maybe interesting information here by the side is if you had more than one job, one parallelism in your cloud service configured, then we would run more containers in the upload process in parallel. So if you had configured 6 or 7 and you had now during the backup, we filled up 6 or 7 cloud containers, we would upload them in parallel to speed up the things.
Yes. And this very often will accelerate the speed at which you're able to write to the cloud overall, because each upload task has its own latencies associated with it, and by running many at the same time, you reduce the impact that latency has on the speed overall. So you see there are 2 jobs here. So there's the first job, which has saved my data. This is good. And then there's the second job, which has saved the indexes onto the object store. So the second item on my slides that I wanted to show you, which I'm going to show you right now, is that a bare metal recovery is possible when using these containers to write to cloud or disk storage. So your P5 configuration and backup indexes will also be written to the cloud or disk container, and then we will be able to recover the entire installation from what has been written into that cloud bucket. So going back to my browser here where I have that P5 installation, I'm switching to another P5 installation. This is a completely separate P5 that's actually running in the cloud, just so to give me another machine to demonstrate this to you with. This is an entirely fresh P5 installation, and I'm going to use this to illustrate how you can recover the P5 installation from my local machine onto this Linux P5 installation, just using that access to that cloud bucket. So let's do that now. So I don't need to license this because the license key will be recovered as part of the configuration. If I go to the P5 menu and go to my configuration restore setting, I can choose to recover from either tape, virtual tapes, which are the old style of writing to backups to disk, or container volumes on either disk or a cloud object store, which is obviously the one that we're going to use. So now all I have to do is pretty much enter the same settings as we did the first time round, insofar as I'm going to hook up this P5 running in Linux instance to the same bucket that we already have the backup data and everything else stored in. So I'm just going to stop sharing
it's again my time, huh?
Yeah, it's time for your singing or whatever you want to do, Joseph.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Or your banjo playing.
no, not for me, not for me. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Right, so that's done. So you can see I entered the same stuff. I apply that, I test it, and it works. So that's good. And then again, on this Linux machine, I just need to specify a directory for the cache so that P5 has some storage that it can write to. And then I apply and restore. And this P5 installation will go to that cloud bucket. It will recover the configuration database, all the settings for this P5, and then it will restart the P5 installation so that if I refresh my browser a couple of minutes time, well, hopefully a lot less than a couple of minutes, I'll get to log in, and we'll basically see all of the same settings and configuration that we performed the first time on the local P5 installation.
It's a slow Amazon server.
Yeah, oh, there's no such thing, is there? It's one of the cheaper ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back. So I'm logging in with the defaults, and you see now everything comes back. So you can see under the backup tab, under storage manager, here's the container storage that we configured. Here's our backup plan that we created that backs up the for backup folder, etc. So all the settings have come back from the cloud, but the backup indexes themselves need to be recovered in a separate step, which is just to go to the backup index here, check to see if it exists. It won't exist, so clicking the start button will recover that.
But it takes a little bit longer, David, so I would skip it. It takes longer.
Yeah, I wasn't going to do it. This takes a little bit longer, but once I've performed that step in 5 or 6 minutes, then I would have a complete replica of the original installation, but recovered from the cloud. So let's go back to the original tab and then back to my presentation. So bare metal recovery from containers is completely supported and now very simple. So if you're doing a backup to the cloud, you've got that peace of mind of knowing that if the machine that you're backing up completely fails, then you can use another machine, recover everything back from what you already saved into the cloud. Okay, so moving on to probably the third bullet on the first slide. We now, well, a little bit of history. So the previous version of P5, version 6 from last year, added support for the Ltfs tape format. So this is a way of writing Ltfs tapes, which is compatible across a lot of different vendors. So it's not a proprietary format. It's an open format that anybody can write a software product. And Archiware now supports this. So if you're archiving data using P5 through the Minimam functionality, then those tapes that you're writing in your tape library or your drive can be LTFS tapes. So that's great because it means those tapes are kind of don't require Archiware to recover data from. Also means you can send those tapes to your customers and they can read those tapes quite easily with low-cost software tools. So what we've added in version 7 is the ability to import tapes that are written in the LTFS format into P5 archive such that the contents across all of those tapes will show up in the P5 archive index, which is what you can see there on the right-hand side. So you could put 4 tapes or 100 tapes in your tape library, tell P5 that you want to import those tapes, and it will load each tape. It'll recover the index from the tape, and it will add that to the P5 index. But all 100 tapes will be searchable and visible in one go in the P5 index. So it provides a really good workflow tool for people that have maybe already been archiving data to LTFS but have no visibility across their collection of tapes. This is a tool now that allows you to both use the index to have a way of knowing what you've archived using P5, but also pull in external tapes into the same index. So a lot of customers have been waiting for this feature, to be honest, because they have a problem across LTFS tapes because there's no visibility of what's on the tapes at scale. So that's what this is adding. So this is quite a big deal, I think, LTFS import of LTFS, and this is running on all platforms that we support.
David, I saw customers there using FileMaker or Excel to generate small indexes of all tapes to search on this.
Yeah.
And they're asking us since now more than a year for having this feature to import foreign tapes also in P5 to have a general one-time index to search their entire LTFS tapes.
Yeah. And I don't know that any other product is actually taking tapes from other vendors and allowing them to be indexed like this. So yeah, we're looking forward to people really enjoying this feature. Okay, the next slide is just a slide which was on a previous presentation, but it's covering the P5 native format, which is Archiware's own format for archive tapes versus the LTFS format. And the big tick here is the one that we just added by allowing import of foreign LTFS tapes into P5. There are still a few features that are only available with our own native tape format, like block level cloning, where you can write 2 tapes at the same time, but identical to each other for redundancy. Also, being able to write across multiple drives in parallel to increase the throughput, or having multiple jobs running at the same time. So there are some niceties around the P5 native format still, but I think the LTFS format is catching up. The one tick that LTFS gets that the native format doesn't, of course, is that it's not vendor specific. So any manufacturer can read those LTFS tapes once they've been written. Okay, so moving on to a feature that is supported by either backup or archive, and that is much better support for the Glacier Deep Archive. So this is part of the S3 cloud storage infrastructure from Amazon Web Services. So Amazon, I put some bullets down the right-hand side. I looked up some prices for you. So Amazon have like a tiered cloud storage product, starting with standard S3, which is what we were using a minute ago to do our backup, which is going to cost you $24 for a terabyte for 1 month. So your monthly bill would be $24 if you have a terabyte sitting in there. And then you can go down the list through infrequent access, which kind of almost halves the cost, which means that the storage cost is lower, but the retrieval cost, because remember there are retrieval costs with Amazon, the retrieval cost gets higher, so that so long as you don't frequently need to retrieve, this one might make sense. Then you have one zone, which is less redundancy, not 3 different zones. Then you have Glacier, which comes down to $4.50, and Deep Glacier Deep Archive, which is $1.80. The main difference being that Deep Archive potentially can take 24 hours before your data is available to you, because it goes deep, deep underground on an LTO tape machine or something that's very cheap for Amazon to run.
And you cannot speed up the restore.
Yeah.
With Glacier Deep Archive. So with
yeah.
Glacier, you can buy a faster restore, but with Deep Archive, you cannot spend more money to get a quicker restore.
Yeah. So it's different products for different use cases. But a lot of our customers want to archive to Deep Archive, maybe in addition to an on-premise tape archive. At such a low cost, it might make sense just to also put a copy into the cloud without much expectation that you would ever need it, but it's there. So
especially, David, especially the combination from if you have a local tape library, and as a second archive location, you're using Deep Archive, and both things have its advantages. You know, Deep Archive, you can store the data more or less forever for less money, and you never have to migrate data local. So you have you're accessing data for a long term, you have Deep Archive, and for faster access, you have your local storage. So it's a very good combination, Deep Archive and the local tape library.
Somebody that maybe is, you just made me think actually, somebody that's maybe, you know, they're doing tape archive on premise, but they're curious about the cloud. They could maybe begin also with the same P5 installation, archiving the same data to Deep Archive for minimal cost, so they can put their toe in the cloud and see how it works without attracting.
You took the best of both worlds. You know, the best of the local storage is the speed and you own your local data. That's one of the advantages of local storage, and the other one is the very, very cheap archive solution for Glacier, and you never have to think about migrating data, because this is now a job from Amazon. It's not longer your job. You know, you put your data, and it's their job to migrate them for all the time your data are stored on their storage.
For every year, But then again, if you put a petabyte in there, then it's still going to cost you nearly $2,000 a month.
But this combination, has more benefits than it has drawbacks, because you have to pay yearly or every 4 or 5 years. You have to change your entire hardware because of your data migration problems. But if you take Deep Archive for this, then you are buying only then new hardware if the old one gets defect or it gets too expensive for maintenance, but you're not under pressure for data migration.
No.
Yeah. Oh, sorry for this interruption.
No, you're not interrupting. It's good. So version 7, this was supported previously, but version 7 integrates this into the new container volumes, which is a really good match, because the objects that the containers that we put into the cloud are always of a reasonable size, which means that when we do a restore, we have to request all of these objects from the cloud. We now do this in a single operation so that they all become available together at the same time. So it just works a lot better with container volumes than it previously did. And so it's definitely worth having a play with, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the next slide has a lot of words on it, which we're not going to spend a lot of time, but the general point is that P5 is doing compression, and it's doing checksum generation to verify data when archiving. It's doing LZ4 compression now, which is the latest, well, maybe not the very latest, but it's a very modern lossless compression algorithm that can effectively run at the speed of RAM. So we can compress data at 0.5 terabyte a second per CPU core on a modern machine. And by modern, I mean basically everything that everybody's going to be running. So this algorithm is open source, but Archiware are using newer algorithms in this version, both for checksums and for compression. so that there's never a bottleneck introduced by doing compression and checksums in terms of how quickly your data is being backed up and archived. These algorithms are very fast. So that's in version 7 as well. There's nothing I can show you there to illustrate that, but there is something I can show you here. So saved archive searches. So this is basically, I've tried to highlight in that screenshot of our Minimam interface where you can set up searches. There's now a save button, and I'll give you a demo of this in a sec, that allows you to add your searches to a drop-down. These saved searches are stored against your user login on the P5 server, so they'll be persistent for you. We also have a recent searches drop-down, which will automatically be populated with the searches that you've done since you've been logged in. And yeah, we also, when we were looking at this earlier, Joseph suggested that we mention that this P5 Minimam interface that more people are using than ever, if you're a user of it and you want a feature that's not in here, then Archiware are very responsive to feature requests. So if you have a if you have a good idea for how to improve this, like in version 6, we added thumbnails for movies, so you get a single thumbnail plus a playable proxy. So we're enhancing this the Minimam interface as we go along, and we're open to your suggestions. So let's just have a look at the search interface. So I'm here in an archive index. Has this timed out? Because Archiware's web interface will time out on us if we leave it idle for a while. So I've got to log back in. Okay, so yeah, if we look at
the feature request button, David.
Yeah, that's what I was going to show earlier. So there's an email address for Archiware. So when you first log in to your P5, click on feedback@archiware.com here with your feature requests, and Joseph will read and respond to every one of them.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Okay, archive index. So I archived a few random JPEG files here with various different file names, like we got bikes, we got clouds. So, and I think I maybe, well, let's make a fresh search. So I did some searches earlier. So if we make let's make a search I didn't make already. So let's search for the word running inside of a file name. So if I go name contains a string running somewhere inside, then, oh, it finds me the folder, but I guess the file names have got runner inside. So let's go back and change that to runner. So this is a useful search for me to have in the days that are coming up. So I'm going to save it. So I'm going to call it my runner search, like so. And then my menu over here will now get runner search. So you can see some other searches that I put in earlier. There's one there for bikes. And these searches will persist. So they're stored on the server. They'll always be in that menu. Recent searches, however, will just have the ones that we recently ran. So if I take another search like archive date is today and run a find on that one, which finds all of those files, then if I look in my recent menu, you can see the date is included in there because that's a date-based search. So every search you do will go into the recent searches. On top of that, if you are in the search results as we are now, and you click off into this sports folder, and then you say, yeah, I need some of these files to go into my restore selection, like so. Then when I click on the search button, I go back to the previous search. So it keeps the search state in the search button for you, and then you could go visit another folder and then add some more images into the basket. So this again is a much requested feature because previously your search would be lost and you would have to rerun the search each time, which was never fun. So this is much better. So upgrade to version 7 and you'll get the cool stuff going on in searches. Okay, so let's see what else we have. So we have the cloud transfer devices, and I'm showing a couple on the right hand side there. One is called the Amazon Web Services Snowball and the other one is a Backblaze Fireball. If you're not familiar with these, the general idea is you might be planning to make an archive in the cloud, but you've got 60 terabytes worth of data, and that's going to take 3 months to upload. So you get the cloud vendor to send you one of their storage devices, and then you can use P5 to begin your archive directly onto that device, send the device back when you've filled it up with your data. Maybe you need several of them. And then the cloud vendor will put that data in a bucket, and then you can reconfigure P5 to talk to that bucket for continuing with your backup or your archive. So this has been streamlined in version 7. So if this is something that you're planning to do, need to do, then you'll find that a lot easier. If you go to the blog page, there's a couple of fresh articles that I've written there which explain how to do this in the context of both the Backblaze B2 Fireball, which publishes itself as a SMB share on your network, or something like a Wasabi Ball, or the Amazon Web Services Snowball, which use the S3 protocol across your LAN to allow you to access the storage locally. So it would be complex for me to show you this in a demo, so I'll skip that, but just as long as you know that we've got better support for these cloud transfer devices. The next one is part of the backup module. So we did talk about this a little bit earlier. So this is where we have a true incremental backup to the cloud without any, including recycling of old data so that that gets deleted from the cloud storage. So previously it was necessary for it to work perfectly, it really required a secondary backup, a secondary full backup to the cloud. This is no longer necessary. So when you're writing to cloud or disk storage, you can just now take incremental backups, and P5 will look after the recycling and removal of old data from your target storage. So now full backups are really only required when writing to LTO tape, because when writing to tape, in order to age out old data, we have to recycle and reuse an entire LTO tape, which is like 12 terabytes worth of data. So this recycling of data can only happen in units of an entire tape when using LTO, whereas with cloud and disk, the unit of recycling becomes this container, which is just 1/4 of a gigabyte. So that's the size of things that we can remove from the storage and age out of the index. What do the last 2 bullets say? I'm just looking. When writing, we have fine-grained removal. I think I already said this stuff. I just went on and said it without trying to read them. The progressive backup technique can be used indefinitely, resulting in faster, more efficient backup to cloud object storage. So you can use this now to back up anything you want to the cloud. I've been backing up my own MacBook to the cloud using this, and everything's working fine. So yeah, now I'm not going to demo that because I did pretty much show you the UI, but I will show you this feature of backup, which is rename detection and dry run. So I'm giving you a screen grab of an expert settings window within the backup module where you can enable rename and move detection, which is the top checkbox that you can see there. So what this means is that we can identify, by tracking these inodes, which are identifiers on the file system, we can identify when a folder has been renamed, and therefore we don't need to resave the contents of the folder because we don't think that a new folder has been created and the old folder has been deleted as a consequence of a rename. We can now track that that was a rename and just make some changes within the index to represent that afresh without having to resave your data. So this is a big difference. I've given an example here. If you rename a 10 terabyte folder with 10 terabytes within, previously we would resave 10 terabytes of data and remove 10 terabytes from the index at the same time. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the dry run, which I'll show you in a sec. So if I go back to my P5 installation here, where we had a backup configured, and that backup, you'll remember, is backing up a folder called for backup, which is this folder here, for backup, which has got 2 folders inside of it, images 1 and images X. So, and if we look inside our index, we will see that so far the index is aware of those two folders, images 1, images X, and in each of those we'll have the files. So if I were to rename images X to images XXY and go back to the backup plan and run it again, so I want to run this manually. And again, this is going to be writing this data against that cloud storage, so it will take a little while to complete. But what we'll see is the P5's ability to identify what happened. And what you'll see in the job log, and I can show you this for the job which already ran actually. So we now provide this file lookup summary, which gives a load of stats about why data was saved. Okay, so you can see here that we backed up 60 fresh files when this ran. So we added 60 files to the index. Now, when the job...
David, it's important to note that this is now the first backup, not the one that we are currently monitoring.
Yes, so this
is the first one.
This is the first backup. So when this P5 installation was fresh at the beginning of our webinar, we backed up this folder which had 60 files, and we added 60 files. Now, I renamed one of the folders and we ran the backup again, and you'll see that the first time the backup ran, we saved 10.6 megabytes. This time, we just saved a few kilobytes. And if we look in here, you can see that no files were added, but 29 were relocated. So approximately half the data was relocated. And then this gets a bit techy, but there was one change of inode, probably the folder that I changed the name of, resulting in an inode change. And 30 files that were in the index were marked as deleted because they no longer exist. So that images X folder no longer exists. We now have a folder called XXY. So this will be reflected in our backup index. If we browse into here again, you see the two folders. So this one has effectively been renamed in the index, and I could look at the prior state at 13 minutes past 6 in the UK. There's my images X folder, and there is the renamed folder. So this is something completely new for P5 backup. We can now be much more efficient in the way we handle people making changes to folders, which they're not supposed to, but often users will think of a better name for a folder and then wonder why the backup is running for several days. So this will remove that, that problem. And going to the dry run, which is the next slide, if you want to find out what a backup will do when it runs without actually running it, that is also now possible via the dry run button. So back in our backup plan, rather than starting the job now, it's possible to do the dry run, and the dry run will effectively give you all the stats that you need, how many files would be saved, how many files are being detected as renamed, etc., before you actually run the backup. So maybe on a Friday evening, you can get the customer can get an overview of how long that's going to take. Joseph, you mentioned there's a plan to allow these dry run jobs to be scheduled so that you could see automatically in advance. Yeah.
This is a future for 7.1 or 7.2. We actually didn't decide. So this will allow the administrator of the system to get in the evening or in the morning information about the current or the next backup run, how many storage it's needed, and then you can decide it's maybe required to label more volumes or to get the older volumes back from the safe or from outside back in the library, so he can decide what to do, what is required for the next backup run. Currently, he's only able to get this information by running this job by hand, but we are planning this to have this also as scheduled jobs.
Excellent. So the next slide is talking about the manual start, which we've already experienced. So I explained that when manually starting a job, you can keep a limit on the amount of data that will be saved. And the final thing from our list of 10 is scheduled sync speed throttling. So basically, this is the ability for for those not familiar, P5 synchronizes a replication tool which can copy, replicate, and update data between two folders, either on the same host or across two different hosts going across the network. And you can schedule when these jobs should run to update these replicas of data. And it's now possible within the scheduler, which is the window that you can see on the top, to determine how much load can be placed on the server by the running of that job. So the general idea is that you might want to limit the amount of bandwidth available to a sync job during working hours when the server maybe has other things to do. And then when people are at home at night, you can schedule the job to run again, but this time increase the amount of bandwidth available for the data copy. So again, this comes from, I think, Joseph, from feature requests from customers' needs,
from
right?
people. They have large SAN systems, and they're using the SAN storage for exporting the storage in the network. And the people are working daily on this storage, and Synchronize is running in the background and is transferring the data to a backup system. And to a backup storage, and this backup storage is also local storage because it's SAN storage. And then we are putting a very high load on this local storage, and this is not acceptable for people that are working currently on this storage. So the only way to limit this load is to say that this local computer, please do not so quick as you could, and this is the switch for doing this. So you can reduce the CPU load on 50%, and this will also reduce the entire load, which will put P5 on the system.
So it's a way of having P5 play nice with other software running on the host or other things.
Fair. Be fair to the user.
Play fair. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so that's the number 10. It's somewhere between 1:45 and 10:45, so we're pretty much on time. As always, don't forget, if you're interested or curious about the software that you've been listening about for 40 minutes, then please go to the website, download, grab a license key to activate it, get in touch with your local partner, and start exploring. So, questions. Have you been keeping an eye on the questions, Joseph?
Yeah, I answered them already. So Steve had 2 questions, Steve Wiedmann, and I probably answered them already. I don't know, but I think yes.
Are you saying did you type a response to him?
Yeah, I typed a response and I answered to all. I don't know if these questions are visible for all of them.
Well, let's just go through them because for the audience more widely. So the questions that I can see all come from Steve. So thank you, Steve. This relates to the Ltfs storage and thumbnails. So I'm just going to whiz back to the slide which is relevant to this. So I think the point Steve's making is that when we're importing data from Ltfs tapes, like as illustrated here, over on the right-hand side, we're not generating thumbnails for the contents of those Ltfs tapes as we do with normal archiving of files, because P5 doesn't see the files, because we're only ingesting the index from the tape. There's a separate partition on the tape, which is quite small, quite quick for us to pass through and understand what's on the tape without reading the files from the tape. So in order to generate previews, we would then have to go visit each file on the tape, read the file, put it on a disk somewhere so we have access to it, and then we can pass it through a preview generating tool to put it in the index. So that would be quite a slow process. So currently we don't do that. In order to achieve the same thing, you could copy the contents of the LTFS tapes to disk and then archive from disk. I appreciate that's a longer-winded, slower.
Dave,
Yeah.
Dave,
yeah.
We discussed this already internally, and we could arrange this because we can read. It will take longer because we have to read the entire tape, but we do not have to read the entire files because to generate a preview, it's only required to read the first, 15 seconds or 5 seconds or whatever we need to prepare a preview. And we discussed it already internally. If this is possible or not. It will take longer for the customer, but if the customer likes to get previews and he is deciding what he wants, then, and if we are able to provide this feature, we will include it. But this is currently not decided, but we are talking about it.
Well, Steve would like it, so that's one.
One at least here.
Steve also says or asks, we've got a large quantity of LTFS tapes, which I suspect it might be the case from the first question, recorded both in a standalone cache system without barcodes and a one beyond system that did use barcodes. How do we associate the P5 index of an LTFS tape with a handwritten?
I answered this already.
Yeah, okay, this is quite a detailed question, I guess, so maybe not so interesting.
But I answered this already.
I can't, for some reason, I can't see the answers, Joseph.
Okay, the answer is very simple. If you have a tape library with, it doesn't matter what kind of tapes are and from what company they are coming. If you're putting them in a tape library, it makes definitely sense to add barcodes to it because that is the simplest way to manage them in a tape library. And if we are reading tapes without or with a barcode, we have an additional field. This would make what is the name description, and in this description field you can enter whatever you like.
Yes.
And later on all processes we are doing, you will also see this description field. Yeah. So if Steve is importing tapes without barcode, then he can describe these tapes later on in the user interface of P5.
Yep. So either way, barcodes or by physically writing on the tape and then entering information. But I mean, I would, if you've invested in a tape library with a barcode reader, then
absolutely
to not use barcodes is to be wasting a lot of your money on the tape library. Okay. So I think the next question is a follow-up. Then we have a question from Thomas. Is P5 suitable for a full backup and restore of a Mac? Do you want to answer that, Joseph?
No. This is an easy answer. We can back up whatever we want. We are not able to restore it.
Yeah, so the restoring of a Mac's operating system and the recovery partition and all of the special stuff that is required for a modern Mac to be bootable again. This was possible in the past. Apple don't want people meddling with all third-party tools which are able to recover and back up Mac system disks struggle with making a bootable copy, including.
David, this is easy. This is backward engineering, so this is not supported from Apple. And you can bring it to work if you backwards engineer the things what Apple is introducing in any new release of the operating system. And they are putting it more and more complicated with additional partitions and so on and so on. So I would suggest back up your user data. This is already complicated enough, and use the standard Apple way to install operating system new, and then you can restore the user data. But I would not recommend to use our tool or to use any third-party tool to back up the operating system for restore purposes or for disaster recovery.
Yeah. So the answer's no, and you should use P5 to back up the home directories. And then the operating system and the application stack should be reinstalled either from an image, maybe that you have a standard image of your build within a company with the application stack and everything. That's still something that you can do. But yeah, we're a tool for the data which is changing. And also, if you install a new operating system on your Mac and then you have a very big backup with a lot of small files, and it just doesn't make sense to use a tool like Archiware to back that up.
Yeah, you can also, what is also working is to back up the application folder. This is a very simple folder, and this will also work on restore level. But if we say, or if our recommendation is going on different folder of the operating system, then it's getting very complicated.
Yeah.
But if this was my Mac, and if I'm doing this for my Mac, I'm synchronizing the entire operating system, and if I need something back, I know the application folder is working very well, and I know also that my user data are safe. But the rest I would never touch.
Okay, question from Ben on a different topic. Is it possible to archive directly into the deep Glacier tier? In the past, I understand you needed to go to a higher tier and then have the AWS S3 rules move it for you. So yeah, I think I'm right in saying, Joseph, that you may now archive directly into the deep Glacier archive tier. You will effectively be Amazon will be receiving the data via the standard S3 connection into probably a bucket on disk, and then they will handle the migration of that into their deeper tiers. But
no, this is David. This is a storage class, and you're specifying the storage class in the P5 user interface, and the rest is dropped on Amazon.
On Amazon side, yeah. So the objects being uploaded are effectively flagged with the storage class they need to go into, and then they
yeah. And you get only in charge, or you get only you have only to take the cost of the lower cost storage class what you decide to use, not for interim storage on S3 or something like that. Yeah.
The Amazon have some good calculator tools where you can put in where you are in the world and how much data you want to store and how much you expect to retrieve and so on, and it'll give you a monthly estimate of what that's going to cost. So that's worth having a look at. So Brian asks, does the number of Ltfs imported tapes have any limit from a P5 licensing perspective, like slots in a tape library? That's a good question. How does that work, Joseph?
Sorry, I was not on the topic.
So
can you repeat?
Brian's going to import 1,000 Ltfs tapes.
Yeah.
How does that impact on P5 licensing? I think it's just the number of slots and drives that you have licensed in your tape library. Is what you use. Yeah.
If he has an example, a 200 slot library and 200s are online, 800s are offline, then our license is only calculating the 200 which are online.
Yeah. And so you can have as
many
tapes as you want.
Yeah.
Archiware just needs to be able to drive some number of slots in your library with its license, and then you can use those slots to import tapes and then take the tapes back out, put them on the shelf, and have a limitless number of Ltfs imported tapes in your index. Ben, just back up the user folder, reinstall the OS and copy back. So Ben's offering some advice. So he's saying back up the user folders, reinstall the OS and copy back the user folder. This is done all the time and safely. So that's the way I would recommend. I kind of wouldn't trust an operating system that's been recovered from a non-Apple tool. I would really want to see the Apple OS installer put the OS on my machine properly. Just copying it, using Carbon Copy Cloner or something like that, I kind of wouldn't trust it to be legit.
Yeah, everything depends on your own experiences. If you run for the past 10 years Carbon Copy Cloner, and Carbon Copy Cloner is backwards engineered any single step from the operating system, which increased from 11.3.4. Now 11. Maybe this is working for them, but this is not a general rule. I would say normally use operating system.
I lost your audio.
User data. Yeah.
briefly there, Joseph.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but only for like 3 seconds, so it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard your point.
Okay. Sorry.
Right, so we're at
Okay,
the end of
sorry.
we're at the end of our allotted time, but we have one more question from Mike, who says, "Can P5 encrypt data before being sent to the cloud?" And the answer is yes. So that would be done. Just to
Yes,
do
sure.
a quick demonstration. That would be done by, like if we wanted to do a backup of encrypted data or archive, I have to go to the data source, which could be the local machine, or maybe it's, well, yeah, it would be the local machine. I need to visit the P5 installation where the data resides, so in this case, this one, and then go to the localhost client, which you can edit via the P5 menu as well if you don't have a license, because it's an unlicensed client. And then under the additional option, no, in this screen here, we enable data encryption here. And that means that all the data as it leaves this machine, going to tape, cloud, or disk, it will be encrypted using the key that is referenced there. So there's a file called localhost.key where we create a randomized encryption key, and then we use that key to encrypt the data before it goes onto storage, and also decrypt the data when it's being restored back to disk again. So if you lose that key, you can't restore anything, so it's therefore imperative to print out and or save a copy of this file elsewhere. So that's the answer to that question. Okay, so we've overrun by a tiny amount of time, but I think that's okay. Thank you, Joseph. I'm going to go to the
Thank you,
final
David.
slide.
Thank you, audience.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Just seeing Mike's, no, it's not a question, it's just a compliment. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. There's a repeat of this webinar at 2 p.m. Central European Time on Thursday, in 2 days' time, if anybody would like to see it or see another version of it. We'll make a copy of one of the webinars this week, put it on YouTube. Thanks for attending. See you at the next webinar, and thanks a lot, Joseph.
Thank you, David, and thank you, everybody. And give us feedback if you like new features, or if you like to see new functionality inside of P5.
Feedback at archiware.com.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Okay. Cheers, everybody. Bye.